It's a peculiar thing, how often we sense that someone, somewhere, is thinking about us. It's not quite rational. Not in the strict scientific sense, but it's deeply human. We've all felt it. You're walking down the street or working late at night, and suddenly you feel that flicker of awareness, almost as if something or someone has reached across the invisible fabric of reality and brushed against your consciousness. Now, I'm not saying you should jump to mystical conclusions, but I am saying that the mind, the psyche, operates on levels far beyond our immediate comprehension, and that when patterns emerge repeatedly, you'd be foolish to ignore them. So let's talk about this. Let's break it down psychologically, symbolically, and practically. Here are 5 weird signs that someone might be thinking about you and what they might actually mean. Sudden emotional shifts sometimes, without warning. You feel an emotion that doesn't belong to you. You're calm one moment, and then inexplicably you're sad or nostalgic or even joyful. Now, Jung might call this the collective unconscious at work, that deep ocean of shared psychic energy that connects all people, and maybe, just maybe, what you're feeling is the ripple of someone else's thoughts moving through that ocean. The coincidental encounter, you think of someone, and then they text you, or you see their name flash by on a billboard. You run into them at the cafe you never visit. Now you could say that's mere coincidence. But it's also synchronicity, a term Jung used to describe meaningful coincidences that have no apparent causal link. The dream connection dreams are strange, yes, but they're also truthful in ways waking life isn't. If someone appears in your dreams repeatedly, especially unexpectedly, it could be that their image is being animated by your own unconscious, but it might also mean they're thinking of you energetically, emotionally, and that connection is manifesting symbolically in your inner world. Physical sensations without cause, a sudden warmth, a chill, a tingle, even a random twitch. Now, I'm not suggesting every shiver means psychic communication, but if it happens at the very moment you think of someone, or you sense someone thinking of you, that could be a manifestation of what ancient traditions called energetic resonance. Persistent thoughts you can't explain. There are moments when a person just keeps showing up in your mind. Not fleetingly, but insistently. You push the thought away, and it returns. You distract yourself, and there they are again. Emotions are not merely fleeting states of mind. They are profound signals from the deeper layers of our being. When you suddenly feel an emotion that seems to appear out of nowhere, perhaps a pang of sadness, an unexpected sense of peace, or a warmth that rises unbidden, it's easy to dismiss it as coincidence or to attribute it to stress, hormones, or the day's events. But what if these feelings are not random at all? What if, at least in some cases, they're reflections of an unseen psychological or even energetic connection between people? In the human psyche, emotion acts as a bridge between the conscious and the unconscious. It communicates things that the intellect can't easily grasp or articulate. Jordan Peterson often speaks of emotion as a compass, something that tells us when we are aligned or misaligned with truth. When a sudden emotional shift occurs without an obvious cause, it may be a sign that something beyond your immediate awareness is stirring. Perhaps another person's thoughts, memories, or attention have brushed against your own inner world. This isn't merely mystical speculation. Psychology, especially in the Jungian tradition, recognizes the concept of the collective unconscious, a deep reservoir of shared human experience that transcends individual minds. Through this invisible network, we may be more connected than we realize. When someone thinks about you with intensity, the energy of that thought might ripple through that shared psychological field, creating subtle emotional disturbances that you perceive as your own. You might suddenly feel nostalgia for no reason, as if remembering something that wasn't consciously in your mind. Or you might feel an inexplicable sense of comfort, as though you've been silently acknowledged. It's important to understand that emotions, particularly those that arrive unexpectedly, are not arbitrary. They carry information. They are a kind of data, but not the sort you can quantify or chart on a spreadsheet. They reveal shifts in the landscape of your inner world. When such an emotion arises, the rational response isn't to dismiss it, but to observe it carefully. Ask yourself, where did this come from? What might it be pointing toward? This reflective questioning is an act of awareness, and awareness is the foundation of psychological maturity. There is also a humility required here, because we don't always know whose emotions we're feeling or why they've emerged. Our emotional systems are ancient, shaped over millennia to detect not just threats, but relationships, alliances, and changes in the social fabric. Before language, before reason, emotion was how human beings communicated in connection. It's entirely plausible that, even today, these subtle mechanisms continue to operate beneath the surface, alerting us to shifts in others' attention or affection. So when an emotion arrives that feels foreign, pause before you rationalize it away. Instead of resisting it, listen. It might not be yours, but it's happening through you. Someone, somewhere, might be thinking of you. And your psyche, in its quiet wisdom, is registering that signal long before your intellect can explain it. In those moments, is not a disturbance to ignore, but a message to decode. A whisper from the unseen web of human connection that binds us all. Coincidence is one of those words people use when they encounter something they can't quite explain. You think of someone you haven't spoken to in years, and then suddenly their name lights up your phone. You're walking through a part of town you rarely visit, and there they are, standing right in front of you. Most people shrug it off and say, "What a coincidence." But if you look more closely, if you're willing to think psychologically, symbolically, you realize that these so-called coincidences often carry meaning far deeper than chance can explain. Carl Jung coined a term for this, a synchronicity. He used it to describe moments when inner experience and outer events align in a way that feels charged with purpose, even though there's no apparent cause and effect connection. When someone is thinking about you, it's as though your minds begin to occupy the same psychological wavelength, and the world around you rearranges itself to reflect that shared focus. It's not that you magically make them appear, but that both of your attentions are moving through the same pattern at the same time. And the external world mirrors that alignment. Jordan Peterson often reminds his audiences that the world is not just a collection of dead matter, it's a field of meaning. We perceive not only through our senses, but through the patterns of relevance that guide our attention. When two people are emotionally or psychologically connected, their patterns of attention begin to overlap. You start noticing signs of that person. Their name, their favorite song, an image that reminds you of them. Because your awareness has been tuned by the emotional energy of that connection. And if they're also thinking of you, the overlap becomes even stronger, creating a kind of resonance that manifests as synchronicity. You might say, well, isn't that just confirmation bias? We notice what we want to see. Perhaps, but that's only part of the truth. Bias doesn't explain timing. When you think of someone after months of silence, and they call within hours, something more than statistical probability may be at play. These moments feel significant because they are significant to you. Meaning itself is the medium through which consciousness perceives reality. What matters to you shapes what you notice, and what you notice shapes how events unfold in your personal narrative. When synchronicities arise, they are worth noticing, not as proof of the supernatural, but as indicators of psychological alignment. They remind you that thought and reality are not separate domains, but parts of a single system. To ignore these events is to cut yourself off from a deeper dialogue with the world. The right response is not superstition, but awareness. Ask, what is this moment trying to show me? Why did this happen now? The truth is, life often communicates in patterns. And those patterns reveal themselves when two streams of consciousness, yours and another's, begin to flow together. Coincidences may simply be the visible ripples on the surface of that deeper current. So the next time reality bends in your direction, just as someone crosses your mind, don't dismiss it. Pay attention. It may be the universe, or perhaps the unconscious, reminding you that we are far more connected than we care to admit. Dreams have always fascinated humanity because they blur the boundary between the real and the imagined. They are mysterious, symbolic, and often charged with emotion. When someone appears in your dreams repeatedly, especially someone you haven't seen or spoken to in a long time, it can leave you unsettled. You might wake up wondering why they were there, what it meant, or whether it was purely random. Yet if you approach dreams as a psychological language, a communication between the conscious and the unconscious mind, those recurring appearances begin to look less like accidents and more like messages from a deeper level of awareness. Dreams are the psyche's way of telling stories that your waking mind resists. They take feelings you haven't processed, thoughts you've suppressed, and connections you don't consciously recognize, and they weave them into symbolic narratives. Carl Jung understood dreams not as meaningless hallucinations, but as the psyche's attempt to restore balance. Jordan Peterson often echoes this idea, suggesting that dreams present us with fragments of truth that are too complex to confront directly when awake. They reveal patterns of meaning that our rational minds have not yet organized. So what does it mean when someone keeps appearing in those dreams? On a psychological level, it may suggest that you share unresolved emotional energy or that your unconscious is drawing attention to the significance of that person in your inner world. They might represent an aspect of yourself, a trait, a memory, or a possibility you've neglected. But it can also mean that there is still a subtle connection between your minds, something that remains energetically active, even if your waking lives have diverged. Human relationships leave psychic imprints. When you form a bond with someone, you create pathways of memory and emotion that don't simply vanish when contact ends. Those pathways exist in the unconscious, and dreams are the medium through which the unconscious communicates. If another person is thinking about you intensely, That focus might stir those same psychic pathways within you, triggering a dream in which they appear. In that sense, a dream can function like an echo, your mind responding to the faint vibration of someone else's attention. Of course, not every dream is a telepathic message. Sometimes it's your own psyche revisiting unfinished business, asking you to understand or forgive, to let go or to reconnect. But the experience still matters because it signals that something emotionally charged is seeking resolution. Ignoring it means ignoring a part of yourself that's calling out for integration. When you wake from such a dream, the most valuable thing you can do is reflect, not with superstition, but with curiosity. Ask what that person represents, what emotion lingered when you awoke, and what that might reveal about your present state. Dreams invite you to listen to the deeper intelligence of your own soul. And perhaps, if someone truly is thinking of you across the distance, the dream becomes a meeting place. Not in the physical world, but in the quiet landscape of the mind where all human connections ultimately begin. The human body is not just a vessel that carries the mind, it is a living instrument of perception, constantly translating subtle energies and emotions into physical sensations. Long before we learned to speak or reason, our ancestors relied on their bodies to sense danger, connection, and intention. That ancient sensitivity still lives within us. When you suddenly feel a shiver down your spine, a warmth in your chest, or a tingling sensation for no apparent reason, especially when someone crosses your mind, it might not be meaningless. It could be your body responding to something unseen, some subtle exchange of attention or emotion moving between you and another person. We often forget that the nervous system is exquisitely attuned to the environment, including the social and emotional atmosphere around us. Jordan Peterson frequently speaks about the profound wisdom embedded in the body, that it often knows things long before the conscious mind does. Your body reacts to patterns, to changes in tone, to emotional shifts in others, even when your rational awareness hasn't yet registered them. So if your heart rate quickens, or you feel a sudden flush of energy as someone comes to mind, it might be your body's way of signaling connection. This is not necessarily mystical or supernatural. Think of it as an extension of empathy, a form of biological communication. We already know that humans unconsciously mirror each other's body language and emotional states. This phenomenon is supported by the science of mirror neurons. When we form close emotional bonds, these networks of empathy seem to extend even further, allowing us to feel echoes of one another's emotional states from a distance. The body, in this sense, becomes a receiver and transmitter of subtle signals. These experiences are easily dismissed because they're difficult to measure, yet they persist across cultures and throughout history. Ancient traditions have long described such sensations as high-energy resonance or vibrational sensitivity. Modern psychology might be the same thing as intuitive awareness. The body's nonverbal intelligence picking up our emotional data before the mind can rationalize it. Whatever language we use, the meaning remains your body is trying to tell you something. When this happens, the best response is not to panic or overanalyze, but to notice. Become curious. Ask yourself what emotion accompanies the sensation. Does it feel peaceful, anxious, affectionate, or sad? The quality of the feeling often reveals the nature of the connection. Over time, you can learn to distinguish between sensations that reflect your own inner shifts and those that might signal an external influence. Peterson often emphasizes that truth begins with attention. To pay attention to your body is to begin listening to the truth of your own experience. The body speaks in feelings and sensations rather than words, and those messages often hold information that the mind has overlooked. So when an unexplained physical sensation arises, that flutter in your chest, that spark of energy, that strange calm, don't ignore it. It might just be the body's way of whispering that you are being thought of, that some invisible thread of awareness has brushed against you. In that moment, your body becomes a bridge between the seen and the unseen, a reminder that human connection extends far beyond what we can rationally explain.